My name is Jamie Amundsen. I'm with the manager of animal welfare at the National Pork Board, and I'm really pleased to have the opportunity to present this forum to you on the common swine industry audit. Just a reminder to everybody, please put your cell phones on vibrate. And if you need to take a call, please step out in the hallway to do so. So I have two other people here with me today, Emily Erickson from New Fashion Pork and Brian Zimmerman of Zimmerman Hog Farms. And our agenda today is really pretty short. I'm going to give you a brief overview on the common swine industry audit itself, give you some details about what is in the audit document and how an audit is conducted. And then the real meat of this session and what is really important to us is that you guys have an opportunity to do some peer-to-peer sharing. Both Emily and Brian have been through a common swine industry audit and are here to speak candidly with you guys about their experiences with the common audit. And I would encourage you during this producer panel session to ask them as many questions as you have. And then if we have time, if the discussion is going great, I won't interrupt it to talk about the resources available. But if we have time at the end, I'll just give you a brief presentation on what resources are available to producers currently and looking forward to the end of the year, what you can use to prepare for the common audit. So before I move on with the details of the actual audit itself, I'm going to let Brian and Emily just really briefly introduce themselves to you and let you guys know who they are.
Thanks for the mic. My name is Emily Erickson. Thank you guys for coming today. I grew up just north of Worthington, Minnesota. My dad raised pigs on his farm, had about 100 sows. So I grew up around them, went to school at SDSU for animal science, and post-graduation I started with New Fashion Pork full-time. My role within New Fashion Pork is to audit all of our grow-finish facilities. Go to all of our sites. We got about 170 sites. Audit those once a quarter. So I get out, I get to see a lot of pigs every day, and then I also oversee all of our packer audits internally too. So, and that goes both on grow finish and on the sow side. So we've probably had 35 packer audits now, the common swine industry audit, so a little bit under the belt. So.
Well, I haven't had near that many. I've had one. And I feel lucky I've only had one, so I don't know how she's done that. But my name is Brian Zimmerman. I'm from Beatrice, Nebraska, producer there. We decided a year ago to do a common industry audit because we wanted to showcase our niche pork just a little bit better. And what better way to do that than have a common industry audit underneath your belt. So we run about 200 sows, more, again, in the niche market, whether it be show pigs or purebred stock. We do a little bit of everything there. So that was the reason we did it, and we're glad we did it. I think there's things that might need to be tweaked in it for different size producers, but we'll get into that later.
All right, so I'll try not to bore you guys too much with the details here, and I hope that many of you are familiar with the ins and outs of the audit, and it's more important for me that you guys have an opportunity to have some open discussion. So I'm just going to go through these slides rather quickly. If you're not familiar, in 2013 and 2014, there was a Pork Forum resolution where producers asked that NPB work with the various packer groups and other industry stakeholders to develop a common audit dealing with on-farm animal welfare. And they wanted, their main point was to facilitate equivalency among packers and to avoid the situation that the EU is dealing with and that they have multiple audits and multiple standards if you're selling to multiple people. So in an effort to avoid overlap and multiple audits to producers and the burden that is associated with that, there was a request that we facilitate the formation of the common swine industry audit. And specifically, their request was that we build off of the two programs, the two certification programs that we already have at Pork Board that have some really good information in them. So please, if you're going to facilitate the formation of one industry standard and one audit, let's have it be built off of the Pork Quality Assurance Plus program as well as Transport Quality Assurance. So as a result of having to try and facilitate those those pieces, we formed the Industry Audit Task Force that was made up of producers as well as packers and other academics, industry people, to support facilitating the development of a workable, credible, and affordable on-farm verification system. And if you're familiar with the basic premises of the PQA program, workable, credible, and affordable are important pieces of that as well. So it came forward into the Common Swine Industry Audit. I won't read all of the objectives here to you. They are written in the beginning of the Common Audit document and are here for your information if you like. So the Common Industry Audit Task Force worked for the better part of a year. All together, came together and drafted what is now the Common Swine Industry Audit that you guys know. It was certified by the Professional Association of Animal Auditors in October of 2014, or PACO. This is the same group that certifies the North American Meat Institute red meat audit at the plants. And then the first audits, the first iteration of the audit started being used in January of 2015. The task force came together again in the fall of 2015 to do some revisions and consider what could be changed in the standard to make it better. And it was revised and recertified by PACO in the fall of last year. And then as of the first of this year, it is being used or accepted by all major packers in the swine industry. And many of the large systems are using the platform of the Common Swine Industry Audit, or the questions and the standards that are within it, for their internal auditing systems or second-party auditing. So do we have a pointer? The audit document that was produced looks like that. That is the cover page. All of these materials you can find on porc.org/common audit. So what is contained in here? We produce the audit materials that include the instructions, the actual standards. The audit tool are the questions that are asked. There is a corrective action template associated that producers fill out for anything that is marked unacceptable on the audit, and they work with their packers to correct those items. And then the audit tool itself is a really nice, tidy production, like a nice piece. But it was really ineffective in the order that the questions were asked for people actually going through a facility and using the audit. So we developed the interactive audit tool, which is an Excel spreadsheet that takes the questions that are in the audit and just reorders them, and that is in a more logical fashion for you to actually walk through a facility and conduct an audit. In 2015, when we had lots of questions about how the audit would be implemented and just basic questions about how it functioned, we produced a frequently asked questions document that I still circulate and still have available on porc.org if anybody is interested in that. And then we worked hard to build some resources for producers to prepare for a Common Swine Industry Audit, like PQA Plus and TQA. All of the materials and extra forms and sheets that you can fill out in the back of those materials are applicable to the Common Audit. We've worked on some other fact sheets and other educational materials, and then also some templates for standard operating procedures for smaller independent producers that maybe don't have access or don't even know where to start when writing a standard operating procedure for their farm. Just a quick note about the branding. You will notice that the front cover of the Common Swine Industry Audit is not branded with any pork checkoff logo, and that is intentional. It is intended that the Common Swine Industry Audit be a product of the industry, not a product of Pork Board or a resource that only Pork Board is dictating or pushing out. And it is intended that it will be that way always. It will never be a strictly branded checkoff product. So once we get into the audit documents, the instructions portion includes some information about the scope. Just a reminder that the Common Audit is encompassing for birth of the animal to transport from the farm, and it is strictly an on-farm audit. Once the animals leave the farm, then we have other audits that would take over at that point. It does cover animal welfare as well as a portion on pork safety. The rest of the audit instructions include information about what is the definition of a site, how to schedule an audit, some instructions for auditors as well as producers on biosecurity considerations, how to choose the animals to include in animal sampling, more instructions for producers and specifically auditors on how to conduct an audit. There are some instructions about scoring, and then lastly about how to complete an audit or corrective action plan. I won't read all of these to you, but the audit standards themselves, this is the next section in the book that includes all of the what actually an auditor will be looking for or looking at, the specific details around each section. We do have two critical, what we call critical criteria within the animal well-being section, which are willful acts of abuse as well as humane euthanasia and timely euthanasia decisions. I'm proud to say that now every one of these 27 key aspects of swine care and pork safety are included in the new version of PQA for site assessment. So it used to be that I used to put a slide up here that represented, or it had stars in front of each one of the items that was formally in site assessment for PQA plus. Now it's all of them, so I don't have to put the stars up anymore. Once you get out of the well-being section, there is an optional section of the audit that is about transport and loadout. Again, this is optional. You only conduct this portion of the audit if there is transport and loadout, if there are transport and loadout activities taking place at the time of the audit. And then there is the food safety or pork safety section. Once you get into the audit tool, like I mentioned, there are 5 questions associated with the 2 critical criteria, so willful acts of abuse or neglect, and then 4 questions associated with humane euthanasia and timeliness. These questions on the common swine industry audit can be marked as pass-fail. There are instructions in the beginning of the audit that if an auditor notices or marks one of these as a fail, that they are given the option to consult with the producer or the site manager, whomever they're conducting the audit with, if they wish to continue. We would encourage people, even if there is a failure, we would encourage you to continue on with the audit because there's a lot of other valuable information that can be gained on the rest of the questions. But that is at the discretion of the auditor as well as the producer going through the audit. And then the rest of the audit tool, like I said, goes through all of the questions in each one of the sections. So the audit tool itself displays what is the acceptable answer to that question, the points possible for that question, and then a space for an auditor to write any comments or observations associated with it. For scoring, the 5 critical criteria in the audit are only marked as pass-fail. They do not have points associated with them. For all other questions or sections in the audit, they have a score or points possible for each question. The point values range from 10 points down to 1 point, and the questions are designed to be all or none. So there are no half points. You either are acceptable or not, and so you either score 10 points or 0 points, depending upon the answer to the question. The animal benchmarking questions are presented in an interesting way. These are designed to get at not just accounting for shoulder lesions, for example, or body condition score or abscesses, in addition to counting them and determining whether or not they reach a threshold. There is a follow-up question for even if one animal is observed with that condition that asks if caretakers have identified the animal and if the animal is receiving treatment. So particularly the animal benchmarking piece is designed really well to not just account for lesions or other animal benchmarking pieces, but to make sure that they're also being attended to and identified and treated. There are there's a total overall audit score as well as section scores. And there is nothing within the common swine industry audit that defines a passing score. That was a decision made by the industry audit task force, and that they didn't feel like the industry should determine what is a passing score or what is not. They leave that up to the discretion and discussion between producers and packers. When we first implemented the common swine industry audit, we got a lot of questions about how does this work, what happens, how do all these things play, how do they affect me, what do I do, what do I do if my farm fails an audit? What happens if I refuse to be audited? Do all farms have to be audited? Do they have to be audited every year? How frequently? Is it more than a year? Is it every 3 years? And who's paying for the audit to be completed? And the answer to every one of these questions will depend on the market in which you're selling your pigs. So any buyers in the marketplace, meaning most of the time in our case packers, will be responsible for reviewing the audit results and any corrective actions that need to be done and determining how that affects business with that producer or that supplier and what requires a re-audit. So I thought that was the perfect transition to allow you guys to ask some really candid and real questions of our producer panel. But before we do that, how many, raise your hand if you have gone through a common swine industry audit on your site? Okay, so a small-ish percentage. All right, do we have any questions for Brian and Emily? Hold on, Chuck.
Emily, could you describe the process that starts an audit? Could you describe the process that starts an audit?
Yep. So in my position, I also have good relationships with our packers. So New Fashion Pork, we deliver pigs down to Triumph and to Hormel and some to Tyson. And so in each of those packing facilities, I have contacts there. And normally what happens is I have some sort of communication with them, getting site lists or that premise IDs to them. And that kind of starts the process. And from there, each packer is a little bit different. Some want a certain percentage of our sites audited. Some just want a handful. But from there, I usually get a phone call from the auditing firm that packer has selected. And at that point, then, that auditing firm will say, we've got X number of sites selected, and it'll be this auditor. That auditor will give you a call here in the next few weeks, and we'll set up a time period or a day, date and time, and have you guys work it from there. Can I answer that one? Sorry.
Can you repeat the question?
He asked how many sites can the auditor do in a day. Depends on the auditor. Everybody takes their own time. You know, I get through my sites at a different clip than some of our internal management. But I would say sow farm, if you're looking at like a 6,000 head sow farm, you're probably going to spend a good 6 to 8 hours there getting through the site. A 3,000 head, you're looking at probably 4 hours. Grow finish, the nice part about our system is that we have the consistency across the board, so our contract growers and our company-owned sites are all held to the same standard. So by the time we get through 1 or 2 sites, the auditor is familiar with what all of our protocols are, what to expect on the site. There's that consistency there. And so, you know, I would say 4 to 6 a day maybe, depending on geography too.
Brian, how long did your audit take?
Mine was relatively painless, I guess, as far as time. We were talking a small niche farm is our Berkshire farm where we had it. We only run about 50 sows on that farm. So we were at it 2.5 to 3 hours, basically.
I'm an internal auditor for Smithfield Hog Production side, and we've kind of been talking here recently about the number of animals that we look at. Currently, we're doing for, I think, PQA standards, so if it's an 8,000 head farm, we're looking at about 300 animals. Do you think it's more effective to look at, like we used to do a third of the animals on site? Do you think it's more effective to look at the PQA standard or more of the third?
Go ahead.
So the guidelines in the common swine industry audit for animal selection are exactly the same from PQA. So the audit itself, if you were just going by what the audit instructions or the criteria for animal selection are, they would be the same as PQA site assessment.
And that's all based on statistic. I was explained it probably 5 years ago, so to backlog that and remember it. But it's a statistical sample of your farm. And so even if you have 8,000 or 6,000, that 300 head is going to be fairly representative of what you're going to find on the farm. On top of that, though, too, the auditor is looking at everything on the farm. So you may be counting out every 9th animal, every 11th animal and observing them, but they're looking at all of them as they go. So if there is some inconsistency or there's something that's not right, they're going to be able to find that.
We've had one external auditor come in that stated that she thought it was more effective to do a third, and then another external auditor said we'll do the PQA standard. So that's the reason why I'm curious as to what.
Well, if they're doing the common audit, then they should be following the standard within the audit and not changing that preference. And if that's something that that's something that I would voice to them too, that according to the common swine industry audit, we're supposed to use the statistical sample of 327 animals. That's what I'm requesting that you do. There shouldn't be any difference between what you're finding with your auditors. So if you guys do find that, or you do have that, I'm going to reemphasize, make sure you're saying something to them. There has to be consistency within this audit.
95%.
Right. Thank you. It's 90. Give Jeff the microphone.
Right? So what Jeff was saying is that the animal selection criteria from PQA Plus and the Common Swine Industry Audit is designed to be a 95% confidence interval of your sample size.
What advice would you give to producers in preparing for an audit?
Preparing. You want to hit this first? Go ahead.
This will be a tag team, I think.
Yeah.
You know, I'm not sure you can prepare. In the swine industry, doing the right thing is always important. And if you do the right thing every day, you're going to be ready. So what we did, obviously, made sure everything was cleaned up, everything was as clean as you could make it, and that's not really what they're always looking for. But certainly, they're going to educate you, and you're going to learn something out of it, as much as you want to, at least. And so in order to prepare for it, just do what you think is right. If you're going to do everything right, you're not going to learn anything, because they're there to help educate you. But anyhow, you write down on the wall and make sure everybody has access to phone numbers as far as your number, the owner, your employees are checked in every day, and the list goes on and on. Euthanasia, everything else has got to be written in a policy. You keep track of all your shots that you've given through the period or the life of that pig. You keep track of your inventory daily and everything that happens daily. So it's all very, very important. Again, there's a lot of stuff that you can do, but make sure you go into it with open eyes so that way you learn something from it. And there's a lot to be gained from it. There really is.
Yeah. No, that is spot on. Take your first audit as a learning experience. Not everything is going to be right. Not everything is going to be 100%, and that's okay. I definitely, our first time, very nervous, very concerned. Even, we've got 60,000 sows within New Fashion, and we had a lot of these pieces already in place, but I didn't know what we were missing. And so that's what we did the first year, and after doing 10 our first year, it's like, okay, we missed X, Y, and Z on 8 of the 10 audits or 7 of the whatever it was, and that's when you go back and do it again. And the thing is, guys, your packers, whether you're a large producer or a small producer, your packers should know you. And so it's a learning experience, and I know for us internally, it's really about creating a culture in your barn and creating a culture in your system. This audit, it's the right thing to do for our industry. It really is, very much so. It outlines everything that we should be doing on our farms, and it's not, in my opinion, it's not asking a ton. I know that there's a lot of SOPs in place that for some of this, I don't know if you had all of them.
I did.
Probably not.
That's where I came from.
And so learn from that the first time you have it. It's for us, it was just making sure that our culture was there, that not only we're doing the right thing with our pigs, but we have all of the other pieces in place. Because when the purpose of this audit is to create some transparency for our customers beyond packing. So the people that are going to the grocery store and eating our product that we're raising, this is creating transparency for those buyers of that product. And so for them to come back to the packers and say, Packer X, what do you have for scores? Where are your producers sitting at? And they can say, 95%, this is what our average score is. I mean, how much better can we be as an industry? That's fantastic, right? So we've used it to improve our culture within the barn and emphasize in our system that this is important, that we are raising a product, raising a pig that's going to become a product for us to consume, and we have to have some pride in that. So a little bit deeper, but it's as far as preparing, take your first time as a learning experience. And the other advice I would give is tag yourself up with somebody that's been through one. Ask them questions. If you guys want my card, I would be more than happy to give you my card. That might be a loaded gun there. But you guys, ask questions. Ask people that have been through it. Because there are, I'm sure, a lot of pieces that fall through the cracks just in preparing for it. I know even with the ones that we just had a couple weeks ago, there were still things that I missed and that I didn't have done on some of the sites or documents that I didn't have up. This is our second year at it. But I'm still really proud of where we've come in the last 2 years. So hopefully that answers a little bit. A couple signatures.
I'm not sure this would be for you, it may be Jamie, is in the process, how do questions get added to the audit? Is there a fear or concern on your part that in the future the packers continue to ramp up effectively asking questions that force the industry to do things XYZ way? Are we losing management autonomy through the audit? How do those questions, if a packer wants something to happen in the industry, now they change a question on the audit, and we all have to conform to that. How's this working? Do you understand the question?
Yeah, so uniquely, I also sat on the task force that developed this audit, and that was definitely, having packers and producers in the room, definitely a big concern all the way around. How big is this going to explode to be? And so I think that's where we had a lot of help from Pork Board in just saying, all right, let's just create a base level. Let's see where we're at. And I really feel like with last year's improvements and additions, I really feel like that's our benchmark. We always kind of use the site assessment as our benchmarking tool on our farms. And so the discussion always was that any packer would have the ability to add an addendum to that to satisfy their customers. So there still is that possibility. But I think that the group that we have at the table for that task force is going to be very concerned about that exact same thing. And so I feel very confident that that group would be able to kind of pull on the reins a little bit and slow things down and make sure that it doesn't get too big too fast. I don't know if you feel the same way, Jamie, but we really got to see how this is going and where our scores are at and where we're at. But it was never meant to be something that dictated what each and every individual producer did and how they did it on their farm.
I would completely agree with Emily's statement on that, and I think it's important to know that the task force is made up of producers as well as packers, and we try to have a wide industry representation on there. And when it comes to comments or frustrations or questions or additions or concerns with the audit document itself, it's not only packers that get to come to the table with those things. Producers at any point can express those concerns, or if they're feeling like if state associations get together and large groups of producers or even individual producers feel like a particular thing in the standard is not agreeable for them, they can voice those opinions to the task force through me, through the Pork Board. And just a reminder that our job at Pork Board is to facilitate the discussion between all of the parties. So there is nothing with the common audit that is purely a Pork Board staff decision. So if you
I personally will field anybody's comments or concerns or questions with the common swine industry audit, and I'm happy to anonymously or not anonymously present them to the task force at their fall revision meeting.
I have a question about the scoring. So there's the 4 areas of focus. Are the scores per area kind of categorized out? So you got your animal well-being, your facility, your caretaker, and your record keeping. So your overall score, you scored 7, but because you didn't have enough so growth control and cleaning up and all that kind of stuff that the animal care was great.
Yep. So the results that I got, and you can chime in too, but the results that I got for the last set that we had done, we had 18 sites done. I got an individual review for each of the sites, and it broke it out by each of those sections. So they do a percentage or total points for each one of those percentage, and then they average out all of those.
So that would be what the Packer would also see?
Yep.
Under the animal care.
Yep, they see the whole thing. And did you get full audit?
Yes. If I would have scored mine, I would have failed on the record keeping, primarily because we don't have it all written out and categorized for other employees. I'm a hands-on owner and manager, so I didn't know that I really needed to go quite that deep. But if somebody else is in the barn that day, like today, they need to know what to do. So it does make sense. I'm not sure that it all applies for a large and a small producer, if you will. There should be some differences in there, and I think eventually we'll get to that.
I think it's also important to note that for the sections, the scoring on the sections are designed so that the highest point value questions are in the animal well-being, animal benchmarking section, and the questions within record keeping are lower point values. And that's not to say that record keeping is not important. It's just designed to get at emphasis on the things that directly relate to animal care and animal well-being, so that packers or producers have an opportunity to look at if you're doing really well in the animal care area, but you have a slightly lower score in the record keeping area, it doesn't completely void your score on the audit. You have an ability to do well in one section and not in the other, and also that points emphasis on the things that directly affect the animals versus record keeping and training things.
I am conducting some mock audits for our system to try to prepare for our fall audits. And one of the things that we've come across with the guys, our contract growers, is the issue of aggressive pigs. We go into the barn, and some guys use a paddle to keep the pigs away from them. And, you get a pig, he grabs your coveralls, and he's tearing on you. If you kick him, what we've had communicated to us is that's an act of abuse. And that really puts the contract grower in a difficult position of how are they supposed to manage that. We had another individual who was a supervisor of pigs. He communicated to us, he's from Iowa, he was in an audit, and this process happened with him with an auditor, and initially the auditor said, you can't do that. Well, about 3 minutes later, the pig tore at him, and he essentially had to take it. Does that make sense?
Steve, you asked the toughest question of the day. Yeah. You're going to get an award for that, and not from me, but somebody. All right. Truly, the employee's got to be number one in this game. Really, really has to be. And the most vulnerable spot in the world when you're working with pigs, right here above that boot. They know where that boot quits, and it hurts. It hurts like heck when that pig grabs a hold of you there.
If there's people who take care of pigs, I would imagine multiple people in this room have been knocked
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. No, and again, employees got to be number one, but we don't have to, protect ourselves in an abusive manner either. Certainly, we need panels or hurdles in the pen when you're inside working there. Makes a big difference, so they can't get at you. Even if it takes two people, one to help protect you, whatever it is, you got to do. One of the things I really struggle with is when we sell call bores, they want these ID tags in those bores. And I'm not going to lose my legs so somebody knows where that damn hog came from. Because those bores got teeth and tusks, and they're going to swing on a dime, and they're going to get you sometime. So we've gotten to the point in that situation, there's always a cure or an answer. In that situation, we've gotten to the point when that boar comes into the barn, it's when we put him in as a young boar. Sometimes I lose him in between there. Well, I just lost $5 because that's what he charges me because I don't have it in that boar. But, I mean, again, let's protect the employees first, and then we'll worry about everything else later. Emily, I don't know what you think about that. But
I think you're positively spot on. It's about the employees. It's about employee safety on our farm, too. So I love the idea of using the hog panel while you're in the barn with them, or asking your auditor to carry the panel with them. Just a personal experience. Kind of have it as you're going through the barn when a pig's getting close. You kind of kick your leg out a little bit. I mean, it's not aggressive by any means, but I sure did that in front of the auditor, and she scolded me and said, "You don't kick the pig." And I was like,
get bit, though, did you?
"Yeah, exactly." I said I didn't feel like it was a kick, but I just mind my P's and Q's after that. But I honestly, I think that's the best advice is, take care of your employees, make sure that they have the panel with them when they're walking through.
Yeah, that's not the intention or the point, right? At all, ever. One of the things that I will add to that discussion, and this sort of relates to a question that I received the other day about what constitutes a tail-biting wound that becomes when is a tail-biting wound a humane euthanasia or timely euthanasia piece? Well, so there's obviously lots of pieces that go into making that decision, right? But and I hate to add an emphasis to record keeping and some of the standard operating procedures, but one of the potential pieces of a solution for that is to have a procedure or a documented plan in place for how you deal with aggressive pigs like that. And if you have kind of a standard business procedure or farm procedure that is, when we have aggressive pigs, we do this to address it, instead of just having the caretakers walk through and having to defend themselves or whatnot, that goes a long way with the auditor for defending your position or why you're doing that. And if you can demonstrate to an auditor that you have this company or farm or site plan in place to deal with those kind of situations, you have a better discussion with the auditor about why you're doing the things you're doing, and how that is. We don't have a plan for intentionally abusing animals, but sometimes because of worker safety, this is what we have to do. Or we always carry this panel with us, or we move X number into a different pen, or we take these steps to mitigate that potential problem. And so documenting that or discussing that with the auditor, and having your caretakers that are going through the audit with the auditor being able to defend that and discuss that will go a long way to that point too.
The auditors have got to be informed enough to know the difference between a willful act of abuse and kicking an animal and walking and trying to keep an animal away. If you were shooing pigs away like this, and your auditor said you can't do that, we've got an auditor problem, not a caretaker problem. So I think it's important that auditor can differentiate between what's necessary walking, because no one, when they're shoring pigs and have them bite or turn around, it's not a willful act of abuse. It's get the pig off and he's biting.
Can I actually add to his question? So on that, because I think it's very related. So other than like a sheet of paper, what is actually in place as far as like training and everything to make sure that the auditors can remove subjectivity to the audit itself? Because I mean, there's so many different auditing companies. There's so many different people that can do the audit. So what's in place to remove that subjectivity? Because that right there is, I could view it just fine. Somebody else might look at that as Well, he just kicked that pig.
And I'm going to triple that question. I mean, between all of us, there's a lot of variation in how we do things, and there might be several acceptable methods of doing one thing. So how does it make it okay here and not okay here, or how? And that comes down to probably the training. You know, how do we eliminate that variation, or not eliminate, but acknowledge it as acceptable.
We could just put the auditor in the pen and see what they do.
That's one way to get it done.
That's the new rule.
Right.
So the PACO, the Professional Association of Animal Auditors that that certify the audit, are also the ones that conduct the training, and they have a basic prereq of some swine production knowledge required. There's been some discussion about whether or not those auditors should have to be PQA Plus certified before they can be certified as an auditor. So the actual training of the auditors is what happens through PACO. And they have new leadership now, and they are working on finishing their curriculum for certifying auditors on the common audit. We try really hard to write the standards and write the questions in the audit so that there is not a lot of subjectivity to it, but we also understand that there are pieces within swine production that are sort of on a continuum, and it's hard to completely eliminate all of the subjectivity. And the auditors, so when the auditors go through certification, they are trained on general auditing procedures that applies to any type of audit that they're doing, and then they discuss each one of the questions within the common audit specifically, and what would examples of what would constitute acceptable and not acceptable for the answers. And I know that they do have a lot of discussion about, well, what about this and what about that, and it usually circles around into what is a one-off and what is typically happening, and how do you deal with one-offs as an auditor in general, not just related to the swine industry. And then the other piece of PACO's training for auditors will be that they have to go through a number of shadow audits to continue their certification, and there is discussion, I don't know if this is finalized, but that they would have to go through kind of a continual calibration or a retraining to make sure that we're trying to remove subjectivity. So that's all I can really say about the actual training of auditors piece, because that's out of Pork Board's control and handled by PACO.
Bingo.
Yeah.
So I will tell you right now that this entire process, it's not perfect, guys. Sorry to break the news, but it's not perfect. And that's the point of having it being a working audit, having the task force in place, having the packer and the producer at the table every couple months to refine this process. And so what I encourage all of you, this needs to be a three-way street between the auditor, the packer, and the producer. That communication had better circle through anytime you have an audit. And I'm telling each of you producers today, do it. Have that conversation. Make sure you're talking to those people. I don't care if you've ever talked to your packer before. If something doesn't seem right between you and the auditor, ask the auditor what they think. Ask them and have a conversation about it in a very professional manner. But then go back to your packer and say, here's the situation that I had. I wasn't 100% with that, because we can't be held accountable for all of the auditor's actions on the site. There are differences in auditors. I don't want to admit that. We're trying the best that we can to make sure that there aren't, but today there are some. I've seen them. I've lived through some of those. And so have those conversations between all three. Every auditor should give you their business card. So if there is something that you don't agree with, have a polite and professional conversation with them while they're on the site, because they should be reviewing with you what they are seeing, what they are finding on the site, and then go back to your packer and say the same thing. I had just a personal example, had an audit last August where the auditor came in and said that we lost points on our dead hut. And it was completely, it had 3 walls and then an opening gate that opened and closed. And he took our points off, saying that it wasn't acceptable. And as far as I knew, for our state and county regulations, we were flying high. We were good on that. And so I went back to both I questioned him at the site, but when I got my final report back, he still had those points off. And that's when I went back and I talked to my packer and I said, here's the deal. I have this situation. Here's a picture. I went back out and took a picture of the dead box to verify that we had everything in place. And my packer said, that's fine. Talk to the auditor. We got our points back. That's the conversation that needs to be had. That's what is expected of everybody in this room, all of the packers that are participating in this common audit, and all of the auditors in there.
In 35 audits, how many auditors have you had?
Why would you hold your producers to PQA and TQA certification, but not your auditors?
Yeah, that's a great question, and one that Paco needs to seriously consider for auditors.
How many auditors is Paco certified?
They don't actually have the certification for the common swine industry audit is not totally complete, so they have not actually certified auditors yet on the common swine industry audit.
There's a group of them that went through an initial training, like the lead auditor has gone through that, and they've brought that down to their auditors beneath them, just, I'm sure, explaining and talking about it, but as Jamie said, it's not.
That they will certify auditors this summer, this fall, early fall. So unfortunately, we have reached the end of our time, but I appreciate greatly your discussion. I think this was fantastic, and I know Emily and Brian and myself will be around Expo today if you have any more questions, but thank you very much.